So I decided to do my project on the Russian Civil War. The causes for the Civil War within Russia were it was mainly because of the political differences between the old groups that were under the Tsar and the new Communist Party that had formed recently due to the revolutions that they just went under, the two different revolutions. Um, and the Communist Party was labeled as the Reds, and the old group of socialists and nationalists were labeled as the Whites. And this civil war caused now what is now referenced as the um, Communist War, which is pretty much just total war, but it's now communist, which means that instead of just most of the supplies being put into the war effort, it is all of the supplies being confiscated and taken away to put into the war effort, leaving little to no, most of the times none of the supplies left over for the people back at home actually trying to use those resources for themselves and trying to ration it out. Most of the time it's just non-existent anymore. But since there was the Civil War, the question then arises of who won that Civil War, and the answer is it was the Reds, or the Communists, if you want to put it in that retrospect. But and here's why the Reds had won. The Reds had won because, one, the Whites had a lot of internal conflict and strife, meaning that they didn't get along very well, and they oftentimes butted heads and couldn't exactly cooperate with one another, and they weren't on eye-to-eye terms, I guess you could say. And if they did try and cooperate, it never went very well, or it didn't work efficiently, which is another way it led to the Whites' downfall. Not to mention they were also extremely scattered out, and they couldn't exactly fight back against the Reds as well, since they were so scattered out and spread out that they couldn't efficiently fight back against the Reds, which ultimately just led to their downfall for one, not being able to be on the same page with one another and always fighting with each other, not being able to cooperate when they did try, and just being overall just too spread out for them to fight back efficiently. And what happened after the Civil War was, despite the fact, here's where some of the, I guess you could call it irony, comes in. Because after the communists had won the Civil War, they established the USSR, which later develops into a series of countries instead of just Russia. And the USSR does in fact take over most of Europe after this, but for the moment it's just Russia, and the USSR stands for the United Soviet Socialist Republic. And what I find quite ironic about the USSR and the government that they create is that the USSR has a constitution, and it's very republic and democratic, which is very ironic because that was exactly what they were fighting against, and yet they created exactly what they didn't want, which was this republican socialist government, even though they were communist, which I find